Hello, and welcome to the Truth Doctrine podcast, where we will be discussing all things esoteric, occult, divine, and obscure. My name's Mikey, and I will be presenting to you information that is important to the development of human consciousness. I hope you're ready for that. So, today, in this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more on Gnosticism and the various schools of thought that accompany the belief systems that helped generate later versions of Christianity that now are the prime religions of the world, or I should say Abrahamism, but more so talking about the development of Gnosticism and the various schools of thought that go along with it. So, in my last video, we talked about Jesus and who he was and the occult order that he belonged to. And we talked about the ritual at Golgotha, which was supposed to change the development of human consciousness for the rest of time, which I think it really has. He's one of the most famous individuals that continue to be talked about today, in lieu of all of the other prophetic teachers or world teachers or messengers of light that have come here to teach the world on how to be a good person, how to learn about transcendence and the evolution of humanity from materialism to divinity. And actually, transcendence is probably the biggest tenet of Gnosticism, meaning that Gnosticism basically gives you a playbook on how to become divine, on how to reach godhood. Transcendence. What exactly is that? It is the movement of one's soul from living pretty much completely in a material mindset and a sensing mindset where you can only really look around at the world and notice things that are matter, and only being interested in matter or earthly things, earthly pleasures, such as sex, music, drugs, all of those things that are very prevalent in today's society, and how to basically evolve past all of that to no longer be enslaved by those urges and those wants and needs and desires, to unite with higher realms. In Gnosticism, there are a lot of different belief systems. There are a lot of different myths that have been taught to explain the predicament that humanity is in. Most of them are non-dogmatic, although they do put an emphasis on being a good person and doing good deeds, and how to relinquish oneself of materiality, which I just mentioned. And Gnosticism uses myth and storytelling to accomplish that, to kind of give humanity an origin story. Because, I mean, think about it. We come into this world as a baby with absolutely no knowledge. And we are reliant upon our parents and our family and our family's friends and all of these things to kind of teach us how to live in the world and how to be a successful person, and make lots of money and just, I guess, be successful. We're reliant on the teachings of those around us in order to grow up and one day go on our own and affect the world in different ways. Everybody does these things differently. Everybody teaches these things differently. Depending on what household you're born in, you'll have various different systems of thought. In my experience, my parents were both. I'm not gonna be light here. Both my parents were drug addicts, and I grew up in a home that we really didn't ever have any money, and they didn't really teach me very much about the world and how to do any of those things that I just previously mentioned. So for me, I believe that my childhood was very difficult. Um, and at the time, I always hated my life and all these things. But in reality, later on, I actually thanked for those experiences because I grew from them. I still love my dad and I love my mom. My mom's been dead since 2011. And even though they were very focused on uh, using and not so much of taking care of me, I still look back on it and I knew that they were trying. But because they were the type of person that was so invested in materiality and the senses and feeling good and, basically what the ego is, being egoic and only really caring about what they can see and hear with their own eyes. Neither of them were very religious. My mom was actually an atheist and my dad's agnostic. My dad believes that there could be a God, but he's not very, he doesn't really look into it, and he discards Christianity and all these other belief systems as being nonsensical. He doesn't understand the purpose of myth. And honestly, it's not his fault. His family was Catholic, and they forced it down his throat when he was very young. And that as he grew older, he started saying no to it and not really wanting it anywhere near him or in his life. So, that brings me to the concept of karma. In Buddhism, there's a concept where there's like a generational chain of events that affects a human's development based on their families. And then depending on how you were raised, your karma would then affect the child that you raised. And it would create this long chain of events that leads to who they're going to be as a person. And that's really what karma is. We're thrown into this world, which is very flawed, by the way. We live in an imperfect, flawed world. It's not perfect by any means. It's not completely chaos either. There's like a balance. There are good people and bad people. There are evil people and terrible people and killers and emotional people, depressed people. That we have a wide variety of consciousnesses living here with us. But we're living in an imperfect world, and the whole point of Gnosticism is not to become perfect, but to liberate oneself from the imperfection and to become more perfect. It's not about becoming perfect, because that's impossible on this plane of existence. It's impossible. You cannot become perfect. Every single human being is flawed. Whether that's birth defects or emotional things, every human being is flawed. In order for people to stay alive, in order for people to stay alive, life must consume life. You must eat animals and vegetables, and which are all forms of life, plants, animals, mushrooms. All of these things are forms of life, and in order for the human being to sustain itself, it must consume life. And that is a very flawed realization. It's very flawed entirely. In a perfect world, in a higher realm where people don't need to eat other things to survive. In a perfect world, we would just be able to live as light beings. So it's very clear that the world that we are living in is completely imperfect. There are apocalypses, there are catastrophes, there are natural disasters, there are wars that break out all the time. Whether that's just a thing that happens to humanity in order for us to evolve, or, fights break out and things quickly devolve into like a controlled chaos. But all of these things are for the benefit of humanity in the long run. It's all about, like I said before, the concept of karma. These wars and these natural disasters are actually consolidations of the karma in order to make a change so that human consciousness evolves. And if you look at it like that, it doesn't really seem so scary. It doesn't seem like an evil thing. You know, really all wars are fought over ideas. You know, think about all of the wars that have taken place just in the last, 100 years. They've all been about people having differing ideas and not being able to agree on it. That's really what they're about. And also natural resources, the need to sustain life. Gnostics and the Platonists urged people to look past all the flaws and to focus on the beauty in the world, to focus on the things that were good, not to completely ignore the negative, but to focus on the good. Don't pretend that those things don't exist, because that's not an ideal path. That's reality denying. You know, and the second you start to deny reality, that's really not good for your development at all. Pretending things don't exist is not a good way to go. So as I said before, Gnosticism has teachings that are based on myth to try to explain what is happening here. The myths in Gnosticism may seem shocking or blasphemous even if you come from a Christian household. But you have to understand that the myths that are recorded in Gnosticism are actually the myths that helped develop the later myths in Christianity and Islam. You know, Judaism came first. And then there was an Iranian religion or a Persian religion called Zoroastrianism, which also led to the development of Christianity and Gnosticism and Islam. So we have a theme here. We have an idea that people use to describe what they're going through, to try to understand the situation that we're in as souls, as beings. Why are we here? You know, so let the imagination run wild to try to explain it, because we really don't have any answers. But with Gnosticism, I think, in my own mind, that this is actually one of the most logical ways to describe what's going on here. So the Gnostic concept of the Godhead is one of the most important concepts that exists in this religious philosophy. The Godhead itself is supposedly basically the light that, like I said, not controls everything, but it is everything. Everything is light, sound, and frequency, and that is what the Godhead is. The source of that light, you know, the source of sound, the source of emotions, the source of everything. Everything in Gnostic theology, everything is God. Everything is just an emanation from God. So if you have like a flashlight, right, and you shine the flashlight and you turn the flashlight on, and at the part where the bulb is, you see that bright light, right? That is the source of the light, right? And then you shine that flashlight around on a wall or on various pieces of furniture or whatever, on a tree, and you'll see that the farther and farther that you get away from the source, the light starts to dim and become imperfect. Not as perfect as the source of that light. It expands outwards, and it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And this is the Gnostic concept of the projection or the emanation of the Godhead. Now, of course, in Gnosticism, back when this was being formulated, they didn't have flashlights. They might have had like lanterns and torches and fires, which I'm sure they probably thought about quite a bit. Like that's a source of light, and as you get farther and far away from the fire, it dims. So as God projects himself downwards, as the Godhead projects itself downwards, the farther and farther it goes, the more flaws and contaminations occur. The imperfect refractions of light. There we go. This belief system combines monotheism, polytheism, theism, deism, and pantheism all into one thing. Monotheism is basically the belief of one God. Polytheism is the belief in many gods. Theism is the belief in a God at all, higher worlds. Deism is the concept of, like God and the devil, the duality, dark and light. That's deism. And pantheism means that you have a right to look to any of these sources of inspiration and to use whatever you see fit to help with your own consciousness. So all of these things together is what Gnosticism is. From the Godhead, there are these various luminaries or planetary spheres, which at the time were given different names than the names that we have now. And I won't really go into that too much because it tends to get a little confusing, because each of these sects had different beliefs on what the names of the planetary spheres were and what their purpose was. So emanating from God are these planetary spheres. The moon being one, the sun being one, Jupiter, Saturn. Well, Pluto wasn't really considered a planet yet because they couldn't see it. Now we have technology that allows us to see into the sky. Well, all of these planetary spheres are basically the arms of God, right? And they were called aeons. And from the aeons, they sprang forth more emanations of lesser aeons, which you could call these things the angels, or the archangels. And there was one specific being, one specific aeon, called Sophia. And Sophia is the Gnostic aeon, or the Gnostic emanation of wisdom. And wisdom, throughout all her journeys and trials and errors, and looking around at all the possibility that there was to create, she created a being of her own. She created a being that was incredibly flawed because of the distance from the Godhead. She created a being that was very flawed. And that being's name is Yaldabaoth, or as the Platonists called them, the demiurge. And this being was obsessed with materiality. And being in the same predicament that we are, where we don't really know what's going on, he claimed himself to be the one true God of all creation. He claimed himself to be the creator of everything. He had no idea that he himself came from the Godhead. Because as the Godhead is completely ineffable, there's no way to really know him or to have a direct conversation face to face with that, or it, not him, but it. He was ignorant. He was incredibly ignorant as to what he came from. And so Yaldabaoth became obsessed with matter and the mind, disregarding all things higher than him. He declared himself to be the highest God there was. From Yaldabaoth, which in the Gnostic texts is synonymous with Yahweh or Satan, he started creating forms. He started creating forms for human beings. And those human beings started growing and becoming self-aware. And in order to keep the human beings from realizing that they had this divine spark within them, he decided to keep them trapped in religious systems, to keep them trapped within certain belief systems that doesn't allow for them to think for themselves. Really just to be spoon-fed an explanation of the world and to just go with that and never think of anything higher, being totally immersed in the material pleasures of the world. And so these humans, who are us, are also emanations of the Godhead. We are emanations from ultimately the Godhead, but emanations from Yaldabaoth as well. Most people live in complete ignorance of their divine spark, of where they came from. They grow up, like I said, in adversity and challenges. And they don't really, until a certain point in their life, realize that there's something more going on than just what we can see and hear and touch. That there is higher worlds and higher dimensions and spiritual planes that are accessible, but only through the mind. So, Yaldabaoth created these religious systems in order to enslave humanity. And all of these religions started popping up all over the place, these hierarchical structures where the priests of those religions were regarded as the intermediaries between the regular human and Yaldabaoth, who the priests thought was the one true God. They themselves assigned themselves the role of being the intermediaries. They took the role of the aeons on Earth. And these beings, these priestly figures who wanted everybody to be enslaved, are called the archons, or it's the Greek word for rulers, the rulers of Earth. So in order to keep people from waking up to their divine spark and higher realities, they started burning books and killing people for their belief systems. If it didn't agree with whatever they put forward as being the one true religion at the time, then they would be killed. They would be chastised. They would be crucified. They would be sacrificed. All of these things for the god Yaldabaoth. And each religious system called Yaldabaoth something different. In Christianity and in Judaism, it's called Yahweh or Jehovah. You remember how I was talking about in my last video about Abraham going up on the rock and sacrificing his firstborn son for Yahweh. Well, Yahweh, like I said, is the same thing as Yaldabaoth. Their names are very similar as well. So as time went on, more people trapped in these belief systems started to understand that there was something really wrong with the thought processes of these priests, and they started to think for themselves. And that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus is a messenger of light. There have been many messengers of light throughout time. And this is, like I said, these are all Gnostic concepts. This isn't necessarily what I believe, but this is what the Gnostics believe. And I do happen to belong to several different schools of thought regarding Gnosticism. I think all of these things, all of these things being myths, have an incredible amount of truth to them. It's kind of like how a movie, it's a fictitious story, but it has so much truth to it that if you dig a little deeper, you can really see the spiritual truths that are hidden in those movies. And that's kind of like what the whole Gnostic thing is. It's a movie with truth within it. So Jesus challenged the Orthodox religions at the time, and then, did the whole ritual thing at Golgotha, and, either lived or died. There are people that think that Judas was actually the one that died on the cross, and Jesus was the one who continued the ministry. But as I said, those schools of thought have become so, blasphemous, because you're not allowed to think for yourself, even though there are writings to suggest just that people have been chastised for even questioning it. And this is what leads to most of the wars in the world, is these varying beliefs. It's so stupid. Who cares what your belief system is? Gnostics really honored the individual and the individual's journey to enlightenment. Instead of living in fear your whole life, take some steps to evolve and to help yourself and to help others. Teach people things like Jesus spoke in parables. It wasn't immediately obvious what he was saying. But then as you study it and you read it, you come to your own conclusions. And so, we have all these beings, we have these emanations of God, we have the aeons, and then we have the archons, which are the evil gods of earth that want to keep everybody enslaved. And these things are continuing to happen today. Now, Gnosticism also had the idea of the NPC, which is, they called them Hyletics or Hylics, which are people that are entombed in materiality and sensing with their eyes what they can see and hear and smell and touch. The people that are not interested in higher knowledge or understanding spiritual planes, those people are the easiest to control. And so why don't we just make everybody a materialist? Because a materialist is only going to believe the things he sees. Right? So there was another group of people called the psychics. And this isn't your typical understanding of what a psychic is, being able to astral project and meditate and channel beings. That's like what the modern definition of psychic is, and those things do exist, by the way. Like I said, I have practiced astral projection for 2.5 years. I know it works, and I know it's something that people have been doing for a long time. Jesus was actually one of the people that were teaching how to do those things to his apostles. Using ceremony and ritual. If you tell a Christian that, they tell you that, you're full of shit. When in reality, they say that meditation and ritual work is blasphemous, and you'll go to hell for doing it. But then they don't realize that Jesus himself was a magician who practiced spiritual things, who did various rites and rituals. So that's really like the Gnostic myth. There's a lot more. There's a lot of arms that go off of it to try to explain other things. But the majority of it is that we live in a flawed world. We don't know what's going on. We try our best to understand things. And there are a few people that rise up in materiality and want something more out of life and want something more out of this waking consciousness that we find ourselves within. And those people are called the pneumatics. Pneumatics are people that are spiritual and ask questions and try to figure out, either logically or emotionally, what is really going on. And when I found Gnosticism at the beginning of my journey, I realized that I was one of those people. And a lot of the people that I come in contact with on a day-to-day basis are Hyletics. They don't believe anything till they see it. They don't understand deeper meanings and deeper truths. And so they go their whole lives not believing in anything at all. There's countless proofs of discarnate entities that exist on this earth, you know, whether that be what people call ghosts or spirits, or there's countless evidence that those things are real. I mean, all you have to do is research that for 20 minutes and you'll find a lot on it. So there was also a belief that if you weren't a pneumatic in this life, that you would reincarnate. There isn't much on reincarnation in Gnosticism. It's basically just that you reincarnate if you haven't reached a certain level of development. So you can think of the earth as a school. You know, you spend your whole life learning and learning and learning and learning and learning, and eventually you reach the title of the Magus, which is like an exalted being that helps humanity, which is what Jesus was. But if you don't learn a sufficient amount of knowledge during your stay here, then you're doomed to come back and repeat it again. And there's countless evidence for reincarnation being the real thing too. Like, there have been people or children that have been born that knew exactly where their previous life was, who they were in a previous life, could even point out where they were buried. You know, there was a child once that just was 3 years old and knew how to fly an airplane. You know, because he said in his previous life, he was a pilot. He remembered his family, and then that little boy ended up actually meeting the family that he supposedly belonged to in a previous life. And that little boy could tell everything about that man that he was. You know, people that have had near-death experiences talk about seeing their lives, seeing their previous lives, and even seeing future lives. Because if you think of life as a continuum, which is what the Gnostics believed in, if everything is just infinite, and then, you know, you go into the near-death experience, and you see all these lives and this life review that they called it, that's evidence alone that there's more going on than just, you know, what I can see with my hands, or see with my hands, touch with my hands and see. So yeah, that's pretty much a synopsis of Gnosticism. It's all up to the individual. There's no, like I said, there's no dogma. It's not like you have to do this or have to do that or be this way or talk this way or wear these clothes or, you know, have a kippah on your head or whatever, or even wear a cross. You don't have to do any of those things. If you don't want to be spiritual, if you do not want to evolve your thinking capabilities, you don't have to. But you're going to come back and do it again and again and again until you start asking questions and gain a sufficient amount of knowledge about how the world objectively works, how the earth works, how frequencies and sound works. And the ultimate goal of the Gnostic is to become one with God, or become like God. Not to become a god on earth and lord over people and tell people what to do and you know, have people slaughtered for their beliefs, but to become like God, as in a higher emanation of yourself, helping people, raising the vibration of the planet. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about Gnosticism. I hope that I was able to give you a little bit of knowledge on the myths and creation story of the Gnostics. There's a lot more. If you guys want more, then go ahead and put it in the comments below on what you want me to talk about. And as well, any critiques that you have regarding the channel or the content that I make, please let me know how you feel about it. And if you like it, give me a like. I was really surprised on my last video, got 62 likes in 5 days and almost 1,000 views. I guess I did something right. I think my next video is going to be about astral projection. Because I really want to share with you guys my experiences and basically a little cheat sheet on how to do it and what sounds that you can use to listen to trigger that response. to trigger the, the rising of the Kundalini, which is, the serpent, the sacred serpent, not the serpent in the Bible, but the sacred serpent, the Kundalini energy, the sexual energy that arises in a human being, and how to bring that basically to the top of your head and to project out of your body. This is something that Jesus taught people how to do. I can't wait to upload again, and I'm really excited that so many people liked my last video. Pretty surprising. Thanks for watching.